This is the farmhouse where I grew up, where my father grew up, where my grandfather grew up, where my great-grandfather grew up. The main house was built in 1860. We got electricity in 1943 with the Rural Electrification Act. And now what I am doing is I'm removing the majority of the 1960 updates and reverting the era back to somewhere between 1920 and 1950. I'm going to show you each room in the order that I did them years ago. While I am no more of a carpenter or a designer than any member of my family has ever been, I'm doing it to suit me and my tastes. This was our kitchen cupboard. As far back as I can remember, it was in our room we called the pantry. I believe it was built sometime around 1880, 1890 because of the cast iron hinges and latches and stuff. Eventually it was taken out of service and put out in our woodshed, which was an unheated space. So I decided to strip it down, bring it back into the house, and restore it to the condition it was in around 1880, 1890. Looking at the multiple layers of paint in one section where the paint was peeling off, we could see that it had been many, many colors over its life. There was several layers of white, and then you got into the greens and the blues and the grays, and when you got down to the very bottom, it was several layers of milk paint, and the bottom layer was red. And so with a lot of citrus strip, we scraped down all of the paint, and we discovered that the right-hand side where the drawers were not original to the cupboard at all. They were a different wood. They didn't have the same layers of paint, and obviously it was an add-on. In preparation to moving it inside the house, we carefully removed the upper cabinet doors and the lower door on the left and the drawers, trying to preserve the original cast iron hardware. The back of the cupboard initially had some kind of wallpaper on it that had mostly peeled off. That was to cover up the holes or the cracks in between the wide boards that had dried and shrunk over the years. And with great effort, a couple of us got that big horse through the door, and we were getting it set up for a better place to work than out in the unheated shed. And as you notice, the left side has not been stripped yet because that was against the wall out in the shed, so that still needed to be done at this point. Once inside, we figured the easiest way to fix the back of the cupboard was to just take a sheet of Luan plywood, it's 1/8 inch plywood, and some glue and some 16 gauge pin nails, and attach it to the back, and then we had a good back that would keep bugs and stuff out of the cupboard. And then I started sealing all of the cracks in the upper section of the cupboard with MH Ready Patch, spackling and patching compound. And then I got the idea to remove the door from the left-hand side and put it over on the right-hand side and do away with those newer drawers that were not supposed to be there. And after I removed the door, you can see that there was 2 shelves, and I decided it would be nice to have the wire shelves, pull-out shelves like we did for the other cabinets, to make it easier to get stuff into the back of the cupboard. And then I did a quick test fit of some various food products that we had on hand to see how it was going to work as a cupboard using modern foodstuffs as opposed to the way it was built back in 1890. And here we started some of the finishing. The upper section was painted an antique cream, and the lower section you can see is in primer. The outside is barn red milk paint from the old-fashioned milk paint company, because that red was about as close to the original color as we could match it. And we know that it was milk paint because it wouldn't come off with paint stripper. And the shelf, it looked like it was used as a cutting board, and it had been replaced before. So we decided to just leave it unpainted and just shellac it the way it might have been way back when. I discovered that it was easier to crawl inside the cupboard swing door side to put the door stop on than to do gymnastics and lay on my back and try to put it in. And the space is so big you can actually get in there, and it was very easy to attach the door stop. When the cupboard door was on the left, the hinges were loose and it had scrubbed for decades. And when we turned it around and put the door on upside down, the door had worn away, so we're using wood filler to build it back out so that it won't have a gap when it's closed. Here I am test fitting new construction door fronts to the wire shelves. To install the wire shelf runners, because the cabinet is so deep, it required the Ryorby impact and a 90-degree angle adapter and a bit to drive the screws in. It was quite a process. And here are the 3 drawer fronts. The bottom one is finished, and the upper ones are ready for milk paint. And notice the cast iron pulls. Those are period Victorian cast iron pulls that we bought at Madison Bouckville Antique Show in New York. I restored those pulls by using the original finish, which was Japan. I buy it from Liberty on the Hudson. You apply it like paint, and then you let it air dry. What Japan consists of is asphaltum and turpentine and kerosene. That was the original finish back in the day, and I restored them so they look exactly as they did over 100 years ago. And here's how I was able to attach the drawers to the wire frame of the shelves. You take your drawer front, and then you put a spacer of wood that is just a bit smaller than the diameter of the chrome wires. Then you put another piece of plywood over that, creating kind of a C effect that slides down over the metal, and then you run a screw from the inside forward or outward into the front of the drawer, not so it comes through, of course, and start screwing it down, and that clamps the drawer front to the wire shelves. And here is the base of the cupboard finished. When we started finishing the inside of the swing door side of the cupboard, we noticed these little cutouts. And what we determined it was is the right-hand side was a flour bin with a tip-out box, and it pivoted on hinges that were inset into those areas right there that you can see that we added little pieces. So we filled that in, and then we just got a piece of scrap vinyl from one of the flooring stores to put in as a new bottom for the cupboard. And here's just a quick shot of the inside of the old flour bin with the antique cream paint. And then it was time to work on the upper cabinet doors. You can see how the citrus strip peels off the modern white paint, leaving the milk paint untouched. And with the upper cabinet doors finished, they were reinstalled on the cupboard. And then the cupboard was pushed into the corner where it resides today. Now, when we had initially stripped the paint off, we noticed that there was the shadow line of a triangular shaped something in the middle between in the style between the 2 upper cabinet doors. And we had no idea what that was for the longest time. And then in a box of stuff that we had taken out of that cupboard, and we went through it, we discovered a Canomat mechanical can opener. And the mount fit perfectly with that shadow line. So I reinstalled the Canomat, and it turns out that it's one of the nicest mechanical can openers that you're going to find. It has all the features of a modern can opener, opening a can with no sharp edges, and this was designed in the 30s. So the modern can openers are just reinventing the wheel. And this is how I rebuilt our red cupboard.